Hi Rates, in this video I'm going to talk you through the different parts of the Bernina sewing machine. You will need to have this booklet here in front of you, and you'll need to be using one of the first pages which has a blank sewing machine on the front. Step number 1 asks you to draw arrows and label the different parts of the sewing machine. It's important that you complete this before learning to thread or sew so that you understand how to use the different dials and what the settings are for. Let's start with the top. Here we have our first item, which is called a spool pin. The spool pin is what we sit our reel of thread on. Moving across, we have our pattern selector. This here changes the type of stitching that comes out of the machine. So mostly in Year 8 we generally use straight or zigzag stitch, and you'll see if you pull this knob to the closest to the front of the sewing machine that there is a little print on there that indicates a straight looking stitch and then a zigzag looking stitch. That's what it should be on at all times. Moving across, we have a thread guide, then we have another thread guide, and then we have a third thread guide. This is because all of their jobs is to guide where our thread goes. We have an item here, a part here, which is called the take up lever. When you're sewing, or if you move the hand wheel, you will see that the take up lever moves. Its job is to take the thread up and down as you sew. Coming down here, you will see that there is a little hook. You have to look quite close, but you will see that there is a hook, and that is called the thread hook. It's like a thread guide. It helps to guide where our thread goes, but it's called the thread hook. We then have this foot looking structure, and fittingly it's called the presser foot. It presses down on your fabric to make sure it doesn't fly away or move in a position that you don't want it to be, and allows you to sew securely. Presser foot. Then you can see the needle in the center, so that is just simply called the needle. We then have this silver plate. That's called the throat plate. That is the plate where we will sit our fabric, and then the presser foot will sit on top of it. So your fabric runs between the presser foot and the throat plate. Moving across to our dials. Now the outside selector here on this knob, it actually has two. You can see one at the front here and then another moving part around the edge. The one at the edge you need to label as the stitch width selector. So this changes how wide your stitch goes. If you imagine sewing in a very straight line, it shouldn't be going side to side at all, so that would be 0. But if you want a stitch to go side to side to side to side, it needs to have some width. So that's when you would change it. So that is the stitch width selector. There is also another selector here, this one that is straight up and down. That is the needle position selector. The needle should always be in the middle of the presser foot. If you need to change it or you notice that it's not in the center, you use the needle position selector. Moving down, there is a second dial. This one we should never need to use or touch. It is to make buttonholes, so it's called the buttonhole selector. This is where the sewing machine can automatically sew a buttonhole for you. Coming down to our other dial here, this also has two functions, so you need to have two separate labels. One, if you twist it, it will slowly move up, or if you twist it the other way, it will move down. And that changes the stitch length. So you need to write stitch length selector. Also, if you firmly hold it up, it will reverse your stitching, so you will sew backwards. So you also need to write reverse selector. That's all the key parts that you might actually change and all the settings. The last part we need to look at is over here, and this is called the hand wheel. This is because normally when you sew, you put your foot down on the pedal, but you can actually move the sewing machine by hand using what we call the hand wheel. So you need to add that label there too. Make sure you have all of the parts on your sewing machine, and this is the end of the video.